Hello and welcome to my channel. Welcome to this two-part video series. Now we'll go through the layout schematics, the available space, the design of the layout of the 3 decks, and the possible operations. Let's go. This video is made possible by the Dubai Trains Patreons. Check how you can become a member to unlock extra content. Let us start with the space and the requirements from the client. It's a freelance layout set in 1990s onward in Germany/European setting. A lot of passenger running, and it's all going to be a Märklin track, a lot of flex track, minimum radius of 550 millimeters, which is 22 inches. This is, for European standards, quite large. And looking at the operations and what he wants, we touched on this last time. He wants a double track mainline, passenger running, a freight yard with some classification work and some industries, and a smaller branch line. So he's quite an experienced builder and modeler. Also, building a helix or some complex construction work is all fine for him. When we started off, this was going to be a 2-deck layout, and later we made it into a 3-deck layout, as you'll see. So the initial conversation starter was this diagram. Let's just go over it again. So we have a main line coming in from the west, this black line, and going all the way to the east, the right. And to generate some more traffic, we make this a junction yard. So the yard is just indicated in schematic way by this black trapeze shape here in the middle. To generate some more traffic, we have here in red an extra line going to the southwest. Initially, we planned maybe some industries here attached to the yard if there's space for that, and some industries on the main line, as you see here. And in blue is the branch line, which would have a majority of industries and a small passenger terminal at the end of the branch line. I wanted to avoid as many helixes as possible. Initially, the client envisioned a helix on the west side of the line and another one on the east side. So I shared with him this diagram if this would be a workable situation as well. So where we have a helix on the left side and a double track main line going into the yard, and on the right side there's just a big return loop. And note as well, in case you don't want it to head back into the station, there is this green dotted line that is basically a bypass that goes straight into the helix, so you don't have to see that train anymore. You can just dive straight into staging. So now is the big magic trick. How does this all fit together? Well, I came up with another schematic, just so forget about radiuses and turnout numbers and stuff like that. This is just like how can it schematically more or less all fit in some kind of space. So let's just go over it. In the middle again, the trapeze shape here is the yard. And remember, if you go to the left, the black and red line just dive straight into a helix, so you see that here. The dotted line is a hidden track, and as you remember, on the other side of the yard there was basically a giant loop to turn around. So if we follow these double track main line, you see that the inner line actually splits off, dives into a tunnel, and then goes around the helix, and at the same time ducks under this entry to the helix right here. And goes around the helix, goes up again, and then joins the yard. But remember, this green line that you see right here, this little bypass, is just right here. It's just this little connection where you would go from the inner track, the loop, just go straight into the helix. And yes, this is a turnout on a helix. We're aware that that's not always easy to build, but it is doable. So let's get planning. Let's go to the track design and see what we can figure out. So step 1 is to put the room in the software. I did that, that's here. Then there's this bed sofa that has to fit somewhere, and a desk, I drew that in. So drawing in the initial design that the client had envisioned was basically a giant layout, a giant loop with the helix on the right and the helix on the left that would be against the wall. And I immediately sensed that this was not the best solution at all. It just, for one, you have these massive depths. This is what, like 1.20 meters? That's not workable at all. And his answer was that everything would be on wheels. So during the construction, he could wheel it all forward and then reach to the back side of the layout. But somehow I did not really see that work. Another thing to note is here on the left and both on the right as well is a hatch to some extra storage space. So there needs to be at least 60 centimeters in this area to access the hatch to store the Christmas lighting and stuff like that. I was thinking more of a around the room type of design, so something in this nature. As you see, I just drew in quickly some different curves to see more or less how much space and how much trackage we have. Here as well, the yard would be, I don't know how many tracks, I just drew in 6 tracks to get a sense of how much this yard ladder would take in and how much width, and if this is all doable. This could be doable. You have a stub end yard, and then you see here also a oval type helix. These are fairly common in Europe, instead of a round helix to have it with these straight sections in the middle. Has some advantages, some disadvantages. The thing is, on top of the helix is a lot of room for scenery, maybe some switching. So you want to have this front and center in your room. So that's why it's here, because it's more or less front and center in the room. But it takes so much space, and we could also move it here to this corner and tuck it away a bit, but then again it's not front and center, and it becomes a bit of a dingy corner, I think, with this massive helix in there. So in ends we settled up with a round helix, but just with a far larger diameter. So the initial idea of this drawing and this exercise here with the curvatures and the tracks and the helix is to see if this schematic could more or less somehow fit in space. And the preliminary conclusion was yes, we do need to look at the helix in a bit more detail, but it could fit. So we just moved on from there. So I don't have a lot of iterations. We're just going to dive straight into the layout design, the final design, and just go through it all step by step. Every time I say we, it's basically me, but I always speak in plural. So here is the final track design. If we just quickly go through it, the whole station in the north here with these double main lines, we have already discussed this in video number 63. So I'm just going to totally skip it. There'll be a link to that video after this one. So here's your main line. You see on the right, the inner track, this is your branch. The branch layer is turned off, so it's just going to stop right here. And then here you have your 2 lines running parallel, your main line. And as said, one of them will just follow it here. We'll go all the way around the helix, as you remember from the schematic. So nothing too exciting right there. That's all the green track, that's lighted green. So now let's look at the tracks in the middle. So for eastbound traffic, you can take this divergence here and dive into the helix. And now it's important to note that both the inner and the outer loop of the helix are bidirectional. So they can both be used for ascending and descending traffic. So for descending traffic coming from the west going to the east, as just explained, you can use this track to dive into the helix. But if you want to come out of the helix, you would take this track here and then go to the outer loop, unless you maintain your right-left traffic on double track mainline and enter the staging like that. So it looks very complex, it's not. And if we just go back to the schematic, it's exactly as the schematic is drawn. So just to highlight this green piece of track right here, one more time, that will be the section from here to here. This track is actually not on the schematics. This will be updated later. We'll discuss that in a bit. We'll have a look at the scenery in a bit. So I just turned on the branch line and all the track that's affiliated with it. On the right hand side, we come in, we do the 180, and then we go up and over the main line and just have some very easy curves to navigate. And then because we have this quite large space on top of the helix, we can have a fairly broad radius curve, just do 180 all around the island, and then end up at this branch terminal at the top right here. So that's all straightforward. The client very much like this, and I do think this will be a very nice scenic area. I also managed to put in some industry, so we have one industry here in the north. This will be for loading and offloading tractors and other equipment. This will be a farmer supply station. And then from this turnout here starts a logging industry. And this is in the middle of the helix, so you want to ideally make some kind of lift out section here. So I would imagine the lift out would be this forest area and a piece of the road, and then perhaps this one track as well. I wouldn't lift out this industry with the turnouts. That's mostly for maintenance of the helix itself, to do that a little bit more comfortably. So this is another big major industry. There's a small team track here, the station is. Then there's one turnout here in the north. This is just a dead end. This is just to create a nice scene with a railroad bridge going over the trackage like that. So this doesn't lead to anywhere. I mean, in the line of storytelling, you could make this that the branch continues to a different line or something like that. But we're not going to do anything with that. It's just the aesthetics. If we quickly look at the scenery, one deck lower, you see the double track main line. Actually warps around and dives into this tunnel canyon, which I think was quite nice. Got a little road there to break the scene. the track on top. There's a little station on the top with one platform there. Here you see it is, I mean, this is going to be reworked later. This is a bit of a mixed mash because you got 1, 2, 3, 4 tracks here, and most of them are on different level. So it can be an amazing scene, especially with this road that crosses the tracks and then the bridge that goes over the railway and over the road. But it needs to be sorted out a little bit better, what we're going to do with these tunnels, especially this tunnel here and this tunnel there, to make it look a little bit more prototypical. Going to the north, here on the right hand side we see 3 tracks that do basically 180. So with the scenery, we're going to fluff it up with some greenery and make it a little bit more of a rural area and a negative space, because we do have a lot of trackage here in the south, and then also here the branch with some structures. And obviously in the north we have this big station with a yard, so we want some negative space to let the layout breathe a bit. So that's what we're going to be doing here on the right. And here we have a very small terminal, 2 tracks for the engine power. There'll be 1 switcher to serve the yard, and there will be 1 diesel engine for the branch line train. So we managed to fit in 5 yard tracks, although the last one does connect to this workshop car repair facility, but you could use it for classification. So we have 5 tracks. Initially we had 4, but this just turned out not to be enough for the amount of traffic, freight traffic that we're going to generate. You'll see that in a minute. Then we have 2 platforms for the passenger trains up here in the north. A note here in orange is a box. This is going to be a swing gate. So there's a lot of tracks here and 2 decks, and this has to be swung away to be able to get inside the layout. So that's what this orange box is right there, and that's how you get inside the layout. So this was the main deck, and as mentioned before, we didn't really envision a second deck, but there is one. So let's first have a look at the schematics. I mean, one who watches my channel regularly knows that I like schematics, so there's always time for a schematic. This is the overall schematic of the entire layout, including the middle deck. Let me explain. Let's first go to the right. The right with Rostadt and the branch line. This is what we already discussed. We've been looking at this. So as you see on the far right, there is this turnaround loop, and then there are 2 tracks, the dotted line. There's 2 arrows here to indicate the direction as well. So now the middle deck, this big fat black line, that is the main line. So the middle deck is basically an extension of the main line in westward direction. Nothing more, nothing less. So it goes all the way from staging, you go up a helix, you go through the middle deck, you go up the second part of the helix, and then continue the main line, and then you come to Rostadt. There are again turnouts on the helix to get on and off to the middle deck. So that basically means that if you don't want to go through the middle deck, so for example the main east connections, they want to go to staging, then you can just skip the entire middle deck with this dotted line right here, and then go straight into staging. And at the middle deck is Grossmering, which is a small yard serving several industries, and then a to be determined named passenger station. Just to kick it off, here you see the helix on the left bottom corner, and then you'll see there's 1 turnout here, so you can get off of the helix or not, and you immediately enter the to be determined passenger station. This is a small rural setting, small station, just 2 tracks, so the trains can either overtake or pass each other. Then we follow the line. There is a turnout here, but this is a dead end. This is just to give a little bit more backstory and to connect the line to the outer world. And then the track right here goes into a 180, dives into the forestry, and then basically just goes all the way behind this industry area. I'll discuss that in a minute. And then here we dive into a forest with a small bridge scene, back onto the turnout, and you continue down the helix. So let's talk about this industry and industry area. So we went on the hunt for the prototype and to see if there's anything interesting that we can model and try to compress into our scene, and that would fit the layout in terms of operations. So we were hunting several maps. You see the track plan here of all types of industries. You can find the entire Germany on here, but we zoomed into this industry area right here. Let me just look at it from the Google Maps. This is the industry area. So it's actually quite interesting because you see it's in the middle of fields. The train comes in here in the south, and then there is a small yard here, team track on one side. And then off from the yard and team track, we have these tracks, let's not go too fast here, that bend off into the industries. So we have one here, we have a second one here. And then to the north, we have the same. We have an industry that's bending off into this area, or a track with several industries, to explain it correctly. And then if we go up, there is a massive logging and wood processing facility. So the track also bends up here and serves this industry right here. This is very nice because actually we wanted several of these industries on the layout. So we're actually quite lucky to have found this. Let's just go through the industries quickly. So first off, here is a steel pressing industry that accepts steel coils, cars with steel coils. So this is great. 2 tracks in a little bit of a gutter in between the buildings, and this other track dives into the building. Just remember that. This is Coleman's Burger. I think they make trailers for trucks here. So do note this is a switchback. So the train will be coming in from the bottom, has to go up here and then switch back to serve this industry right there. And then here we have more trackage. Yes, this Bitunova I think is a propane or gas dealer. This will be interesting to add because then you got some tank cars on your layout. That is an interesting industry. Note there are several tracks. I'm not really gonna give a spoiler alert. We don't have space for 4 or 5 tracks. And then here there is this Richard Schultz that also deals in all kinds of aggregates and stuff like that. So that would be interesting as well to give some hoppers on the layout. And then here north, we actually wanted a wood processing facility. So lucky us, there's a giant one here with 2 aspects. First, the logs and the processing of the wood as raw material, and then here on the right is to, let's say, create engineered wood, all kinds of plywoods and OSB wood and stuff like that. So this was a fantastic find. So let's look at the design. Let me zoom in a bit. So first thing we see is a siding here. This is specifically meant for freight trains to halt on and then reverse into the yard facility. So let's look at the yard. The turnouts are more or less in some kind of prototypical order. So you see there's 2 tracks here, and there's 1 track here with a team track on the south. And I tried to keep the general feel of the yard in the design. So the feel is that you have this yard and you have tracks that turn off away from the yard. So that would be this one here, and here is the switchback from the Schulerberger that we saw as well. And also on one side of the layout, it's a giant wood processing facility, so I could incorporate 2 tracks for that. One for the raw materials and one for the finished products. And on the other side, we have this facility that accepts the coil cars. So I could take the 2 tracks from that. So you see one disappears in the building, as we saw in the prototype, and the other one goes in between in this more or less urban canyon, as you see there as well. And then this here would be your yard lead to switch the yard out. Note also that you could use this track here on the other side as a yard lead as well. But if you have cars parked here from arriving or departing trains, then you can't really use it as a yard lead. So if we just have a quick look at the industries, as I said, the lumber is on the left, team track is here on the bottom. The steel mill, it's not really a mill, but the steel facility is here on the right. Then we have the Richard Schultz that take the aggregate here first off, sharing this track with this Bitunova, so for the gas facility. And then we have the logistics. We didn't touch on that, but it's just a warehouse, I believe, that accepts all types of cars right there. And then with the switchback, we go into this Coleman's Burger facility that makes these truck trailers. One small compromise is that the main line and the passenger trains are running all the way behind the industry. There's nothing really we can do about that. I mean, you could try to force the main line in front of this entire scene, but then on the right side, you're going to get a far too tight radius, so that just doesn't work. So you got to make some kind of like switch over. So we just decided to put it in the back, and then these buildings here, they will actually block the view, which is very nice because then you'll see the train running just behind it. So, and then we come to the last deck, the bottom deck, that is the staging. All these tracks are staging tracks, except for the middle 2. I'll come back to that in a minute. So how it works is, because these 2 tracks are bidirectional, you're going to stage them on the staging tracks first thing straight away. And then once you depart from the staging track, only then will you choose which line you're going to take coming out of the staging. So let me just illustrate my point. Say you're coming in from here, and then you would just stage your train on this track right here. And then if you want to depart back to the same line, Well, you'll do this 180 loop right here. And as said, you go to the middle 2 tracks. So one more. So if you want to go back the way you came from, you choose this turnout here. You take one of the middle tracks, and then voila, you did a loop, and then you can go back over here. Now, if you don't want to do that, you want to take the outer loop of the helix, then you go to the other track of the 2 middle tracks, and then you can take this direction just like that. And the same for the other direction. There are some special features in this staging. Here is a cleaning track with a cleaning device, and here's some kind of connection to a showcase where you can actually drive your trains into the showcase. So those are special features right there. So note here on the right hand side, remember we needed to keep 60 centimeters free to access this hatch that's over here. So actually this section right here, this piece of benchwork is collapsible. So there's going to be a hinge right here, and you can just collapse this away in the case that once or twice a year that you have to be here in the storage. That's how we solve that. So that was the layout. Now, if your head is not spinning enough, let's go back to the schematics. Here's a schematic. We already went over this. So I don't really want to elaborate on it. You can pause the screen and look at it in more detail if you want to, because I made another schematic for all the schematic fetishist people out there, including myself. This is actually a functional schematic that will show the layout as it is, and I drew in the helixes. So you can see that the red line dives into the helix here and only reappears here on the level where the staging is. And in addition, the green and the yellow one are dotted lines, and the route of that train would be dotted here and skip this whole middle deck as well, as you see there. And also the staging itself, the schematic is accurate. So it would come in from the staging stage here, and then as discussed, you would make your loop, then go onto the middle track, and then choose which direction you want to take. But this is not something I would really hang on the wall on the layout. This is just more, I don't know, a bit of eye candy. So now on to the operational side of things. On the north side, you see a schematic of the railroad. So not the layout, but the railroad. And here you see the different trains that we have. So we have the first 6 ones are passenger trains. So we have an intercity that just basically goes from west to east and stops only in Rostad. Same from the east to west version, only stops in Rostad. Then we have an intercity comes in from the southwest, so this red line also only stops in Rostad. And then the bottom 2 ones are interesting. There's a commuter that comes in from the staging and stops at the to be determined passenger station, and then goes to Rostad, where it turns around and then goes to TBD again, and then to the staging. And then there is the branch turn. So this train originates on the branch because the train will be parked there overnight, then goes to Rostad, goes to TBD, turns around there, goes back to Rostad, and then back to up the branch. So I said these trains will all be operated by a computer program. So as the client explained it, these are just going to be running constantly by themselves. And then through that, you can order a freight train, for example, to go to the arrival departure track in Rostad, where you would manually take it over and then do the freight operations. So talking about freight, here are the different freight trains. So the first 2 ones are the East Drag and the West Drag, which will have a stop to lift and to pick up some cars in Rostad. Then we have the Southwest Drags, same, but goes to the main line, Southwest in red. Then we have the GM. GM is the name of the industry area on the middle deck, the Grossmering, the GM local. So it will basically go from Rostad to GM, switch all the cars, pick all the cars there, spot them where they're needed, and then go back to Rostad. And then we have the Tumingen local. Tumingen is the name of the branch line, more actually the station at the end. And it's just local, so it will go from Rostad to Tumingen and switch everything along the line, and then go back to Rostad. Burning question in your mind might be, how do you determine with all this information the size of your yard? So I quickly calculated that by determining how many cars are going to be needed for each of these trains. So the East Drag and the West Drag, and also the Southwest Drag, these are not terminated in Rostad, meaning they will pass by, pick up a few cars, drop off a few cars, and then head out again. And you don't want them to drop all the cars off and pick up a whole new train. It doesn't work like that. They're going to be picking up and then dropping off, let's say maximum half a train length. Maximum train length is 1.20 meter for the freight trains, so they'll pick up maximum half length, which is 60 centimeters. So this train can, at some case, need 60 centimeter of yard capacity to pick up and or to drop off half a train length. The same for these other drags that are just passing trains. So we have 3 times 60. And then the GM local can actually have the max capacity of the train. So it's 105 centimeters of cars, and the same for this the local, and also 105 centimeters of cars. So you might be thinking, why don't we just count the number of cars instead of counting the centimeters or inches? Well, in the European landscape, the length of a car can actually change by a factor of 2. It can be 40 feet, but it can also be 80 feet or 90 feet. So then counting the number of cars doesn't really work, because you can be missing the mark by 100%. So that's why we're using lengths of trains for this matter. So if we add up 60, 60, 60, 105, 105, the total is 390. So in the old yard design, we had 515 centimeters of yard track, and I thought this is going to be a little bit tight. I mean, ideally you want your yard to be maximum half full. So looking at the yard design, that's where we now have 1, 2, 3. So then we have a 6.65 meters trackage right there. I think that's a good yard size. It could still be a bit bigger, but you don't want to squeeze in as much track as you can. It's just not going to look nice. And this will work and it will operate. So if anyone interested in gradients and radius, so the outer radius of the helix is 70 centimeters. The inner radius is 61.8 centimeters. And then you'll have 10 centimeters of clearance between each deck at approximately 2.4 to 2.5% incline. All the other radius, the minimum radius on the layout are about 60 to 61 centimeters. So now let's have a look at the gradients and where they stop, where they start. So you'll see 2 red lines. This red line here, the first one, is where a gradient starts. So in this case, it goes from 0, that's the height of the top deck, to -4, this line right here. And there's also a gradient onset. So the gradient actually starts here around 35 centimeters earlier, and this is to gradually get into that gradient. But for calculation measures and to be on the safe side, I actually start calculating from this line here. And then we go here to -4.5, and then we go all the way here to -10. So again, we do have to go to -10, because if we go to the left, you'll see, as you remember, we have to go around the helix and duck underneath the main line right here. Once we've done that, we start inclining again from -10, here halfway more or less for -6, and then we stop here at 0. We have a little gradient offset just before we get to the turnout. So around here, we're going to be at -7.55. And then we have, well, what is it? I think around 2 meters. Then we have around 2 meters and 9 centimeters to go from -7.5, turn around, go horizontal, go up a bit, and go to -5 centimeters, and then also head back down, because this is a downward sloping helix. So it is a bit of a roller coaster, but I think it is doable with that space. And just in there is as well as turnout, and then we have 2 meters 15 centimeters to connect here at the 0 height. That turnout. So let's just look at the branch line. So the branch line starts to incline right here a bit earlier, because we have to go up and over the main line here at 5.5 centimeters. And then we just keep on inclining until we're here at +10 centimeters. And there we stop, and we'll just remain horizontal. And that is the end of the layout design. I hope everything is clear. If it's not, please put it in the comments down below. And as we started this video, I thank you very much for watching and for supporting everything that we do, the channel and through Patreon and the social platforms. That's all for now. Thank you very much. Bye bye.